Thank you so much.
Yeah. I mean, I would have had recorded copies, but this way, you'll have yours. Okay. Yeah, and I'll do that for all of them. Thank you for reminding me. Okay. So I'm going to repeat what I did anyway, just so you can see it. All right. So I'm just going to undo it. So again, if my data is full, there are no blanks, I can actually pick any cell. And then I go to insert and I hit table. Now it asks, is there a header row? There is, because your top row is not a data row, it's a descriptor. That's what's meant by a header row. Okay. And once I do that, it's going to put the data into a table. You can always tell it's a table because it'll color it. And the other thing that you're going to notice is when you're out of the table, meaning you're in any cell that's not in the table, you won't see the table tab up top. When you're in it, you will see the table tab, and that's this over here. So it like puts it in or it's not. So people sometimes ask me, like, what happened to it? They just don't have their cursor in the, within the range of the table. So there's a couple of things interesting about tables that are really useful. One of them is they will automatically update if there's additional data added. You don't have to redo any kind of range. So for example, if this is 2015, but for example, if I added 2016, and I'm just making up numbers, it doesn't really matter. Notice that it added the row. And you can tell that because of the alternating colors. And again, if I did another one, it's just actually adding it to the table. So it's really great, especially for data you're entering. And you could certainly use it for data you're porting as well, but it's great because it'll actually just keep adding on. Now it'll also do it for columns, but I really wouldn't want that here. But let's say I wanted to add another column, for, I don't know, salaries. As long as it's adjacent, it'll automatically add it on, okay? But most of the time we're adding rows. So that's kind of a handy feature of tables, okay? So you'll notice that when you're in the table tab, I'm just going to go over some of the stuff. You can certainly change the color, which you may think is not all that relevant, but actually I'm just going to show you something where we're going to do a nice job presenting the data, where having a different color for each one of the units can be actually kind of nice, okay? If you want to take the data out of being a table, my recommendation is get rid of the colors first because they remain and it's a pain to get rid of them. So among all the choices, the last one is just take the colors out, and then you can go to convert to range and it'll just take it back. Now it's just ordinary data again. So again, I'm going to go back in and create the table. Okay, so there are two basic things that Excel does really easily with tables: sorting and filtering. So you'll notice that on each one of the top header rows, there's a thing that just looks like a little triangle going down. It's a filter, they call them filter buttons, okay? And I have an ability to do basically two things: either sort them ascending, descending, or select a sub portion. So let's filter first, okay? So let's say that I only wanted to look at 2014. I'll just select 2014. That's my data for 2014. And, or if I wanted to pick 2 years, 13 and 14, I could do that. So I have an ability to, create like a subset. Now, the way it does that is it actually just hides those rows, okay? But it's nice. And then I can do multiple filtering as well. So for example, I could say I want to look at 2000, and I'm going to unselect them in 2013 and 14. And then I only want to look at my schools. So I don't want central office and I don't want facilities. So I can simply unselect and just select the schools And now I have my data for my schools. Or conversely, I could do the opposite and say, I just want my non-schools. So now I have a multiple sorting, okay? So those were multiple filtering, okay? So those were for descriptor columns. You meaning they have like names, or even though these are numbers because it's a date, they're really descriptors, it's a year. What happens when we try to filter over here on electric? It's a meaningless filtering initially, because what am I going to do? Just pick 12,000 or 15,000? It's not a useful filter, right? However, you have more advanced filtering here. You can also do greater than, less than, top 10, top 10%. Okay. So I'm going to just do, this is the most common one, top 10. So it says 10, but you can pick any amount, right? So if I wanted to know the locations that had the highest utility, well, actually, let me unfilter this. I've got all the data. Well, actually, I do have it all. Let me make sure. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I just want to, my top highest utilities for electric. I just hit 3. And so now I have my top highest utilities for electric. So most people who don't do financial stuff, they usually only filter on the descriptors. But those of us that work like in analysis and finance, I actually use these more, you know, where I'm actually looking at like, and again, this is an example with utilities, but it could be like my vendor list. Give me my, you know, top highest vendors, you know, or POs for the year, you know, or so this top 10 is really good. Okay. I can also do, you know, bottom as well and say, give me my lowest. So even though it says 10, I can select any amount. Okay.
Okay.
I can also do, by the way, if you want to clear it, just go to the top where it says choose one, that undoes it. Okay. So as you see, there's a whole bunch of other ones greater than. So for example, I wanted to have anything that was over $15,000. And that'll just give me the, almost everything's over 15. Let me make it 19. So that'll give me like all of the costs that were over $19,000. So again, a good use of that might be, you know, I just want to, let's say we have a procedure where we want to have, we're required to have a second signature on anything over $10,000. And I want to just pull a list of anything over 10,000 to verify, be an auditing thing. I can easily do that. Okay. Or if I had a question, if these were salaries for employees, you know, give me the salaries of all the employees making over 100,000, or give me my 20 highest salaried employees. So I can match that against where they are in retirement to see if it's worth doing a retire. I mean, there's a lot of, I think you get it. I don't have to give you all the kinds of analysis you can do, but that's kind of handy. So there's a, so there's a lot here potentially, you know, and again, just go to the top to change them. And again, you can see there's like between, there's average, below average, etc. Okay. All right. So if you notice, there are no totals here. There's no total on the bottom. And there's a reason for that. The reason for the no total on the bottom is if it automatically included a total on the bottom, you couldn't add additional rows, okay? Because the total would get in the way. However, you can select to have it provide you the totals. So what I do is I go to table, and there are a lot of different choices here. A lot of them are like, you know, they're like aesthetic. You can get rid of your bands or not. but the one that's really critical is this total row. Okay. And I'm going to select it. So by default, it only gives you the total for the left hand, the most left hand, right hand column. What you would think it was like, I'm not taking that, like a grand total. Okay. So, however, you can actually select any of them. And actually, let me just go to the one that's there first. Okay. So it defaults to giving you the sum, but you don't have to do sum. You can actually do any of these. So in finance, I don't see doing standard deviations. Okay. But average or max or min could be useful. So if I do max, it's going to show me my highest one or my average. So I don't have to know any formulas. There are formulas for these things, but I don't need them. And these are actually subtotals. So if we filter, it's going to eliminate any of the hidden rows. Okay. So let's assume we'll stick to the most obvious one, which is going to be sum, right? And again, I'll have it for both, right? So let's say that I now want to do, and we can do a lot of them. We'll stick to the ones we did. We're going to filter by schools versus non-schools. And I'm going to generate reports, okay? So the first one I'm going to do is the school one. So again, other ones. I'm going to pick all the schools. So that's my schools. Now those totals reflect just the schools, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. Now I don't have to copy it to the same tab. I could copy it anywhere, but I'm just going to put it below, okay? By the way, when you paste sorted data that's in a table, it automatically takes it out of a table. It's not a table anymore. And that's because of the hidden rows. It has to do that. However, I now have that. I can now do a report. All I have to do is put a title on it. Okay. Oops. And I'm done, right? Yeah, I can pretty it up, make it a little bit bigger. Okay.
When you chose the sum, there was a drop down like to the right. Where did that drop down go? You have to click it before the drop down comes.
You have to click it.
Okay.
And then it gives you, you can also tell it you don't want anything and blank it. But the typical one you're going to want to pick is the sum. Okay. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then at that point, once I've done it, I can copy it. Right?
Yes.
So now, because I want to make reports that look attractive, right? I'm going to go back to table and pick a different color scheme. Just pick anyone that's different. And this time I'm going to do the filtering. And I'm only going to pick the non-schools because the presumption is making two different reports, right? One. Now I pull this. And then I just, again, need another title. And there we go. So it's pretty easy, you know, particularly if you have to generate a report from a large set of data, because you can then filter the portion of the data you need, and the totals work automatically. It reflected the the totals of whatever I was filtering. Okay. And again, I'll just do one more. I mean, we could go on forever with this, but maybe I want to filter by years. So I just want a 2015 report. That's 2015. And then again, could change to a different color scheme. And there's my 2015 report. And then presumably I could do one for each one of the years. So it's extremely handy, okay? So I'm going to unfilter this. I don't know why it's doing that. This color scheme, it just doesn't work for me. Okay. So this is more aesthetics, but I tell you, I have done this. I had a project once where we were doing an analysis of whether or not a district should do facilities in-house or use a contractor. And we did a very complex analysis. And I was thinking about how to present it at the public meeting. And my first inclination was maybe I'll do a PowerPoint. And then I decided I'm not going to do PowerPoint. I'm going to use Excel. Because I can flip through the tabs really easily and make adjustments or answer what if questions, right? So one of the things that's really nice that tables include is this thing called a slicer. So a slicer is really just another way to filter. So I'm going to create a slicer for there are only two slicers that make sense here. Slicers really only work with descriptive filtering, not with like top 10. So I'm going to actually create a slicer for years. And I'm going to go back in again. And create a slicer for unit, basically building and facilities. By the way, interesting enough, when you're in a table, you get a table tab. When you're in a slicer, you get a slicer tab. And I can also, like, just for aesthetics, make, them a little bit different colors, okay? So now I have this ability to make adjustments, the multiple adjustments that I did with the filtering using the slicer, right? So I'd like to, I'm just going to talk, I'm going to do an analysis, blah, blah, blah. It's a meeting. Like, let's take a look at 2016, 2014 for our schools. So I go to 2014, I just click it. And then I'm going to select the schools. Now, the way these work is they toggle. So if you want more than one, you just got to hold down your control key, right? So I do, let me clear them all. I pick the first one. I then hold down my control key. So I'm able to, everything like floats in the table based on what I select from the slicers. So this has been really helpful when I've done stuff involving different divisions, where maybe I've had different buildings. I said, now let's take a look at where we are with this building. And then we talk for a while, I'm describing, and then I go, now let's take a look at that building. And it's just a question of one click. So for example, if we were doing utilities, and I'll do it for all the years. So let's just talk about Daniels Street. These have been our utility costs. And now for the high school, it's looked like this, blah, blah, blah. Middle school. So I'm able to flip very easily without having to like fiddle with this. It just makes for a nicer visual presentation. And I can also add, I'm not going to do this with you today, but I also could add into that, you know, including a chart as well. I could pull the data and have it, and the chart will adjust based on the slicers. Okay.
So you use this Excel sheet, that's what you put up on. And
Correct.
and then you just go about whatever it is that you're talking about, what you want to show them.
Yeah, I really think it makes for a nice, you know, works nicely, you know, and you know, the fact that we can flip around and have it's just a click rather than to get involved with this where they have to see all of that dropping down. They're not really seeing anything. All they're seeing is me picking the school, you know, the location. So it just works really nicely, you know. And so, yes, from time to time, rather than try to take all of this stuff and pull it into a PowerPoint, you know, one thing nice about Excel is you can actually zoom in on Excel. So I could start out, if I had this on a projector, I could start out and say, let's take a look at our, let's take a look at Daniel Street. So this is Daniel Street, and I just zoom in on it. And then I'm making the comments, then I zoom out and say, okay, now let's take a look at our high school.
How are you zooming? Are you using the bottom right, that plus and minus, or no?
No, well, I'm not. I'm actually using I'm on a laptop. I'm just using my pad and I'm spreading my fingers. But yeah, you could do the bottom as well. I just find it easier to do it that way. Okay. I'm just trying to point out that, you know, this can make for a very nice presentation. Yes. And it gives you a benefit that you don't have with PowerPoint. And that is, if somebody asks you something that wasn't one of the things you had a slide for, if as long as you understand your data fairly well, you can easily, like, you know, manipulate the data, you know, right on the spot, you know.
Yeah. Also in PowerPoint, you're limited to the size of and sometimes when you put all the stuff in, it's so hard you can't read it.
That's like, right.
You want to focus in on that. This looks good.
So I'm able to do that. And also this could be part of, there could be larger data and I could decide to hide a column. We're only looking at oil, you know, and so I can make sure that whatever data fits on the screen nicely. And I can also do I can do what ifs on the fly. That's the real advantage here. You know, I can do, if I'm asked a question that wasn't even part of what I had anticipating having a slide for, I can answer it. Especially given the fact that it's got a nice little tool here, you know, like, okay, so what was the average? You know, okay, here was our average per year. You know, it's pretty easy to do. So once you get kind of adept at it, it just has a lot of great uses. Okay.
Okay.
So it's good to put it in your toolbox. It's not really all that difficult. And that's about it. I mean, you know, at this point, for what you would use your tables for, I want to take you through some other little kind of tips for handling the data and for some other stuff that's useful. Okay.
Okay.
And you just have to play with this. But I think once I have to tell you, you can do some of this sorting outside of tables because, you know, there's a sort feature up in the corner, but using the table feature, it's so much easier. It really is. It's just so much better, you know, and the slicers are really nice, you know. Okay. All right. So I wanted to spend a little time talking to you about how to clean up your data.
Okay.
Now, again, a lot of times when we're pulling data, particularly if it's large data, it's not like something that we typed. We're porting it from some sort of a system, you know, like Envision or a work order system. You know, it's not like, you know, it's not typed in data, it's ported data. Okay. Yeah. And so usually it's pretty clean. So you may not have issues, but I want to just give you a couple of tips to how to simplify cleaning up your data. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to the table and talk to you about what happens when there are mistakes in your table and how you can spot them. Okay. So the first one here is blank spaces. Now, obviously, this is a very small list. If I wanted to get rid of the blank spaces here, I just go to each one and just delete it. Okay. But if this were 10,000 rows, that gets to be a bit of a pain. So I want to show you how you can do it, how you can shortcut that. So what you want to do is you have to highlight your data because there's blank spaces all over your spreadsheet. And then what you want to do is go to find and select, which is that looks like that magnifying glass on the top of your home ribbon. Go to special. I gave you a copy here so you could see it. Okay. That's a screen capture. You select blanks. That now highlights your blank rows. And then you go to delete. You can actually just delete cells. But if you're a little nervous about it just doing the right thing, that eliminates your blanks. So even if you had like hundreds of blanks, it will get rid of all the blank rows at once. So
You know how I was doing it?
What?
If I have like a lot of lists, like, codes or whatever, I would just highlight everything and sort it. So all the blanks went to the top or the bottom.
You could do it that way too. This is better. Okay. This is definitely a better approach. Okay. Because basically it's just finding them. And you just say, highlight my blanks.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you can actually even just hit delete. Okay.
Okay.
So that's definitely handier. And that's going to solve a lot of problem if you have blank rows. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So our next thing is crappy data. Okay. So this is the data itself. It's just food orders in a cafeteria for one day, not even a whole. It's a small subset. Okay. And actually, I'm going to take all of this out because I want to do it with you. Okay. This is in the wrong place. All right. So you can see the problems with the data. The first one, the pizza is all capitalized. The next one's lowercase. Fish sandwich has an extra space. Like it's all over the place. The data's sloppy,
Mhm.
and although tables don't really have a problem with this, they can handle it. Pivot tables do not do well with data that's different. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
pivot table's going to absolutely go crazy if you have, and you're going to end up with unable to analyze because it's going to treat pizza different than pizza. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to, so there are two functions that are good to know. They're considered text functions, not a numerical function, to clean up data. So the first one is proper. And so all you're doing is it's equals proper. I mean, I know you're a fairly sophisticated Excel user. I don't have to explain to you. So I'm just referencing to the cell to the right of it.
Mhm.
And that's going to clean it up. So what proper does is it capitalizes the first letter of every word
Okay.
and makes everything else lowercase. Okay.
Right.
So you can see how that cleaned up the uppercase, lowercase problems. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The second piece here in this original data was, and some of it you can see, some of it you can't even really see. So there are problems with spaces. This has an extra space. This has a leading space. Okay.
Right.
Trailing spaces you can't even see.
Right.
That would be like a trailing. There's like extra spaces at the end of the word. And again, Excel tables, they're okay. I'm going to go back to our data and show you what will foul it up and what won't. Okay. But for the most part, the regular tables can handle leading and trailing spaces. They ignore them. The space in the middle, that's going to treat it as two different items. Okay. but trim cleans it all up. So since I already have sorted it out alphabetically, I've fixed the, the capitalization, I'm going to refer to the second table rather than second column E, rather than the first one, because I'll kill two birds with one stone. So here I go trim. And now again, I'm going to scroll down. And that eliminated all my problems with blank spaces, extra spaces on either side. So here, for example, I had hamburger, there was a space in the beginning, it's gone. Here on side salad, there were 2 spaces, gone. And the trailing ones, although you can't see them, they're all been fixed. Okay. So now I have clean data. I've capitalized everything and I've gotten rid of all the problems with blank spaces. Okay.
What if instead of proper, you actually want everything to be in caps?
You can do that. So I was going to show you that after. There are 2 other functions, upper and lower. So there's actually 3 that are good to know: proper, upper, and lower. Okay. But yes, if for whatever reason you wanted everything in caps, you just use the upper function.
So other than proper, upper, lower, and trim, are there any others?
They're not that are relevant to this. There are a few other text functions, but they're really not, they're not all that. I can't see a lot of uses for them. These, there are a lot of uses for this.
Where do I find these if I don't remember, like what it's called? Is there a list somewhere here?
Well, Excel lists its functions, but the problem is you need to know what to look for. You know what I would probably do if I forgot? I just do a Google search, how to make everything uppercase, and and you'd find it. But you have my recording, And anyway, you're going to end up using this is one of these ones you're going to end up using, because so many times people screw up even their own names when they're typing in things. Or when people are inputting, I find a lot of scripts with uppercase and lower cases. The only thing this won't fix is a misspelling. So if somebody, spells elementary wrong, that's not going to help you out. But it's a good way to clean up your data. And I find the one I use the most often is proper.
Okay.
Especially with names, proper is perfect because it's going to capitalize first and last name. Okay.
I did something else because I use match a lot when I look at one worksheet and another, so that I can match, and I put it. And I've had a really hard time because of that trailing space. And you say, wait, that is the one. I remember that I figured it out and I wrote notes to myself, but I have to open my worksheet to see what I did. But
trim is the perfect way to worry.
Yes, I agree.
To resolve especially the trailing space, which you can't see.
Right, but I figured something out.
There are ways,
but it's not as easy as this. I agree.
This is so much easier. Okay.
How about, is there anything like, sometimes when I get a list from Envision, and then when I get a list from another place, somebody uses somebody's middle initial at the end, and then a dot, and when they don't. Is there a way for me to get rid of the middle initial or get rid of the dot or something?
Well, maybe. Okay. So I just learned this recently. It's okay. So one thing that's really kind of cool about Excel that we take for granted is flash fill. So flash fill, if I just do the word T, it automatically gives me the options that were available. And you've seen that, I'm sure. It just happens whether you realize it or not. So for example, like here I have high school, elementary. If I start typing M, it automatically gives me the choices that were in the list. Okay, so that's flash fill. So I just recently learned about this kind of neat use of flash fill, and I'll see if I remember how to do it. If not, we'll have to do it next time. Okay, but now this only really works if they're in separate columns. It's not going to really help you at all if it's, if they're just the names, and some of the names have that. That's really tricky to get rid of middle initials. It's a very complex undertaking. This one's simple though, okay? So I'm just showing you where sometimes there is a middle initial and sometimes there's not, So what you do, and you usually need to give it at least 2 for it to know what you had in mind. I'll just do one more. So here I do let's see if I think it's Control E. And notice that it picked it up. So it'll figure out the pattern. You can also do that with like a middle initial, like just
I'll tell you what I did. I used the delineation thing and
yeah,
separate.
I know. The problem is it's really complex because you need to like calculate say the first time you hit a blank, and it's just a pain in the butt. It is doable, but every time I've looked at it, I get a headache, All right, so let's go back to this cleaning up the data. Just the last thing. So what's going to happen here is I don't need 3 columns. I really only need 1. So you might be tempted to delete the first one, but they're referenced. So just bear in mind, when you do this, you have to copy the end result and then paste it as a value.
Yes, I know.
Okay. So you can just go, you can actually, there's a lot, you could delete the other ones, but you can paste into the original first column as a value, and now you can get rid of your other column.
Yeah. Can you go back to D, column D? I just want to see. Okay, one set of that's a value. Did you paste it as a value yet?
Correct. So, and
no,
what
paste it as a value first. I want to see what is considered after you do that.
Oh, like it's just gonna be the text. Okay, so I'll do it.
So it's not gonna say it's a value like on the top where it says general. It's not gonna say value. It's gonna say text. Right?
It was always text. It's using value to mean paste as it's seen.
Yeah.
And it would be the same thing with a number. If you had a function. Yeah. And you do paste value, instead of pasting the function, it pastes the number. Right. So it just means pasting the result. Okay. Yeah. So here I just do paste value. And at that point, I don't need the other columns. All right. Yeah. So I do want to show you just a way that you could shortcut this, so you don't have to do all these stupid multiple columns. Okay. you can collapse it, you can nest them, right? And it, by the way, order doesn't matter. So I could do equals trim, then put proper inside of that. And if you're ever confused about how many parentheses, count the functions. If there are
Yeah.
two functions, you need two parentheses, right? And now I just have to scroll down. So I combine the two. I do not know why it gave me that. Okay. But I was able to combine the two.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't really matter which one I put first. So I could have done proper on the outside and trim on the inside. Same thing.
Okay.
But so that would clean up the spaces and the, you know, and the capitalization in one shot.
Very nice.
And then at that point, once again, you would just take whatever column you just fixed
Yeah.
and copy it. You could paste it into the original as a value, and then just eliminate, you know, delete this column. That's basically it. There's your clean data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go back to the table and see what happens in tables when there's an error. Okay. And how it handles it. Okay. So here I'm going to just make a couple of errors. Okay. So the first thing is I'm going to make the high school lowercase. So let's see what happens when I look at my list. So it still only shows up high school. So it didn't treat them as two separate items. You will notice that in the description, it showed it as lowercase because it bases this on the first one it sees.
Okay.
So for example, if it were this, that was the one that was lowercase.
Yeah.
Then it's going to show up as high school. So as soon as it gets the first one, that's the basis for the description, but it doesn't treat them different. So it's not case sensitive.
Okay.
Okay, that's a good thing. It also doesn't really have a problem. I'll do it over here. Doesn't have a problem with a trailing space, a leading space.
Yeah.
Still only one middle school. Now, again, first one encounters will determine what it shows, but it's not going to affect the filtering. So you'll notice here, actually, it didn't even show it different. So it's fine. So you're not really going to have a problem with the regular Excel. You will in a pivot table, but with an Excel table, it's not going to have a problem in doing the sorting if there is a difference in capitalization. Okay.
Right.
Or
Right.
leading or trailing spaces. So if I had trailing spaces here, not a problem. Not a problem. Okay.
But misspelling is not going to work, right?
But misspelling's not going to work. Or a space in the middle. Now, how do you spot this though? Okay. So the first thing you do after you create your table is you look at your filters. So I left an A out of Daniel Street Elementary. Okay. So now when I go to do my filtering, I immediately see I'm looking at two Daniel Street Elementaries. Okay.
Yeah.
So immediately tells me there's something awry. Either there's an extra space or there's a typo, right? So
Yeah.
the easy way to fix it is I pick the one that's wrong. And then edit it. Now I go in, it's fixed.
Okay.
So the first quality control is to look at your list.
Yeah.
And if you're seeing a problem, I'll just do one more so you see this. So this is not a typo, it's an extra space on middle school. So here I look immediately, I got 2 middle schools, right? So you do
Right.
have to look at it for a minute. It's once you look at it, you see, oh, I can see there's an extra space. Got it? I always
Yeah.
select the one that's wrong. Because if there were 3 of them that was wrong, I can fix them all.
Yeah.
And then I just go in and make the small fix. And as soon as I do that, it's automatically reflected in the table. Okay, so that's the tip. Fine, and that's something that we're going to use when we do pivot tables as well. We're going to be looking at the first thing we do is a quality check of our data to make sure that we don't have multiples of stuff, which is usually, again, either a spelling error or you know, or a space in the middle. Okay.
Right.
How are we doing time wise here? We got time.
Time is.
Yes, there's just a lot of different uses for this. I mean, that are so obvious. I'm not even sure I need to do this one, but I had an example. Somebody was in facilities. She had they were giving out uniforms. They have beautiful uniforms for the facility staff that have the name of the district, and they provide 2 of them to each employee for the year. So they all came in with their requests based on size, and she had to place the order. So she didn't want to have to count them by eyeball. She wanted an ability to get the numbers right away. So I said, the easiest way I know to do that, by the way, there are like count if functions that you could do. So you say count if it's large, but tables make that so much easier just to do, right? So all I would have to do in a situation like this is I'm going to go insert table, right? And here, I'm going to do a total. Now, when you have in our previous spreadsheet, our most right-hand column was a numerical column.
Right.
But what if your most right-hand column is a descriptor? It's not numbers. How does it handle it? Well, it can't sum, small, medium, and large. Can't average them, but it can count them. Do you follow?
Yes.
So it automatically selected count. Just automatically defaulted to count. And that's going to happen with any column that isn't a numerical column, which, by the way, here there are no numerical columns. Okay. So if I put it here, once again, it's going to default to, it would default to count. Got it?
Right.
Now, once I've done that, I can sort. So all I have to say is, okay, give me my smalls. In fact, I'll do it here. Small, medium, large, right? So I've got my smalls. But one thing you gotta bear in mind, if I copy them, it's linked. They're linked.
But not if you copied the table like what you did last time.
Well, yes, that's true. But maybe I don't need to do that. I just need the orders. I need to know how many 5 smalls, mediums. I need to be able to place the order on order sheet. So I need what? Like 5, right?
Yeah.
So now I'll do my mediums. But notice it changed smalls. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not going to work. So what I have to do is do my smalls. I could either manually type it in, which is probably what I would do here, or I have to paste value.
Mm,
Because it's dynamically adjusting based on the table. And then I could do the same thing with large.
right.
And, but I have to make sure that if I'm copying it down, I paste to value, don't just do a paste value. Okay. You
Yeah.
got that?
Yeah.
Now, let me just give an example of that separate from this. Okay. So, and I pulled a subset of this data, but White Plains did the curriculum people, when they know Excel, they ask you to do stuff. So even though I was working in the business office, out of professional courtesy, when the curriculum people called up and they said, help, I said to the SBO, can I help them? She goes, do it. Goodwill. You know what I mean? So they had done this survey and they wanted to be able to analyze the survey data, figure out how many answered each question. You know what I mean? So I put the data into a table. I just want to select the totals. Okay. So once again, these are my totals. I'm just going to look at the first one. There were 183 responses, right?
Yeah.
So what I want to do is be able to break them up into the different categories. Okay. So
Right.
I had a little bit of work because I had to figure out what the categories were. Like I'm not going to do all of them. I'll just do very confident. Okay. So what I did down below, and it was a little time consuming, but it wasn't the end of the world. So for each one of the questions, I just created like a little table. I'll do actually two of them. We'll do somewhat confident. Got it? So now what I do
Yep.
is I use a filtering and I just do very confident. That gives me my answer. It's 37. I just copied it. I had to remember though to paste special so that it doesn't change when I do the next one.
Right.
Then I just go and do somewhat confident. And again, I would do it for all of them.
You know those survey monkeys and things like that, when you post it out, they give you all this stuff.
I know, unfortunately, they did this like using a Microsoft form. So it ported the data into Excel. That part was easy.
Yeah.
But they wanted me to analyze the data. So now if I had all of them, now all I have to do is I'm sure I don't need to show you this. I basically was able to break them up by percents, but
Yeah.
it pulled the data.
Yeah.
And the fact that it had the count function and the filtering, it took a little time because I had to do each column, but it really wasn't all that, difficult to do.
Yeah.
Once I got in the groove, I was able to, I think it took me about an hour to do the whole thing, and then I created a little pretty chart for each one. But so filtering can be really useful for survey data where you want to be able to count the particular responses. Okay. And then also theoretically, if I had, for example, they had different bargaining units. If I wanted to know like how many responses there were from a particular bargaining unit, I could just get my total for the bargaining unit. Like there were 6 from the ASA, which is that's their aides. And as you would expect, see, there's an error here, nice it and nice it. So I go to the one that's wrong. There's a good opportunity. And I change that. That's going to clean up my data. I only now have NICET.
Mhm.
And I can see that most of, as you would expect, most of the respondents were from NICET. So, you know, don't underestimate the value of counts. They can be really useful, particularly if you're looking at like number of items per vendor or number of requests of a particular type, kind of handy. So that's kind of another use of this kind of survey data. But once you get the hang of tables, there's just so many things you can do with them. Like I said, you could break this up. These are by bargaining unit. And if I just wanted to know, you know, I just wanted to look at one particular bargaining unit, like faculty. And then remember, I can do my totals. I just have to select as an option the total row, you know. And again, the reason it doesn't have it as a default is so that you can add additional, you know, rows down below.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. But once you know your data is good, so then I could, you know, just sum up benefits and salaries
Mm-hmm.
per that unit. And then
Right.
I could also use a slicer, you know, and do admin next. So it's really handy. Now notice it gave me the number here because that's on the end. But if I don't need that, I can just say none and just have it show me what I need it to show me.
Right.
You know, and there are other things here. Maybe I would hide age, you know,
Right.
you know, etc. So your mission, or if you want to play around, I have it's just fake data, but it's food sales, prices, and the items. So I would say try this one's already in a table. Okay.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
try sorting it out, getting a total, you know, so you have some comfort with, you know, sorting it by different, you know, types and getting a feel for it, you know,
Okay.
but it's pretty easy. Okay.
Yes.
And then tomorrow we can work on, we can go to pivot tables. So I'm not sure you really know the difference. Okay. So regular tables are really very good for summative data. Pivot tables are good for transactional data. So transactional data is data where each row is an event, like a sale, or I had one, you know, it was for a town. Every time they issued a handicap sticker, that's a transactional event because it's the, you know, it was who they issued it to, or even accident reports. But it has to be like it's very event driven, but it
Right.
doesn't work with like summative data. Regular tables are great for summative data. Pivot tables are really good for transactional data for doing like analysis. My experience is 90% of what you're going to do, you're going to use a regular tables. Pivot tables are kind of, it has some uses, but it's not a thing people use every day,
Okay.
you know, but the regular tables, oh my, use them all the time. There's so many things, even just for just a quick sort, you know. You know, I was doing work in White Plains, and I don't know whether you have this in Lindenhurst, but White Plains has 4 private schools in its within the boundary. So we have to bill the other school districts for health and welfare and for special ed services. It's a pain in the butt. Well, the pain in the butt is New York City, but so they were not really managing the accounts receivable well on this, who owed what, or and following up. So I really put them on tables, and I showed the business official how you could like see, which ones are out for more than 60 days, which things are like, do we have from previous years? So, because some of the stuff we decide to write off, but almost all of what I did with the tables. And it was really handy just to be able to quickly say, okay, let's look at all the health and welfare items that are outstanding more than 120 days. And then let's make a decision. We actually had a meeting to decide what are we going to demand payment for, what are we going to write off,
Yeah.
etc. So it was just helpful, and it could also be extremely helpful if you are at year end and you're deciding what things you want to, again, with the receivables, what you want to carry over and what you want to write off. Like big write-offs were around like food, with collected, money from kids, where we just decided if anything was less than $12, we were not going to go try to, pursue it. So you could easily do that because you can do less than in the sorting. So we had the whole list of all, they were using Heartland, and so we ported all the data at the end of the year, and we said anything under I think it was $15, anything under $15, we're not going to bother. It's not worth the time, sending letters for $15. But if there were large sums, we do it. So we just use the tables to sort out all the items that were over 15, and then those are the ones we did follow-up letters with. So a lot of good uses. Okay.
So
right,
speaking
so
of tomorrow, we're supposed to do 3 hours. I think that might be a little too much for me to absorb everything. Can we do it to 2 hours? And then do we have another session already scheduled or no?
We have one for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then I think we had one for next week. Okay. You want me to check?
Yeah. I just want to, because I have it on my calendar, but I don't want to get out of this.
Yeah. So I have the tomorrow and the 29th.
And do we do 2 hours on the 29th or one?
Today we did one. We can do 2 hours tomorrow. Well, let me just check before I open my mouth. I don't have anything else. Oh, you find a bigger block would be helpful? Or you want to do shorter? What do you want to do?
Well, it depends on what we cover. I did do pivot tables with you once before.
Okay.
But like I said, I didn't do it, so I would like to have it recorded and we'll go through it quickly. But there was other things, we never did PowerPoint, and I mean, I know how to do PowerPoint, but I don't know if you have some secrets or